Got the right side of the breakers.
Yes, he did. Chris Van Meter in third place right now can comfortably draw in.
It's an experiment one for Scott Metcalf. That'll get the ball rolling. Ed will just play a swamp. No thoughts. He's addressed for him on turn one. So Metcalf has made it very clear what he's up to. A Temple Garden's going to come to play untapped. So a great start here for Scott. Going to be able to evolve that experiment one with a Fleece main line. And in for two, he's going to come.
And against Mono Black Devotion, it almost doesn't matter what you're casting as long as it's something. They're not very efficient in the first couple turns of the game, so if you can get out in front of them, often they can't catch up.
Devour Flesh will be cast. That'll take care of the experiment one, so Metcalf will gain a little bit of life up to 20 with just a lone Fleece main line on the board. He will draw a card for the turn. You can see a couple copies of Boon Satyr over there. The question, of course, is does he have the third land to cast Boon Satyr? You can see a Temple Garden, so the answer is yes. That'll come into play untapped. The cave does go down to 15.
Nothing suspicious here.
No, I have nothing. It's your turn. I just felt like taking two.
Shoot! Forgot. All right, it's your turn. Nothing to see here.
Absolutely not. Mecabe is going to cast a Thoughtseize. Wants to see exactly what Metcalf is working with here. Metcalf more than happy to put the hand on the table. Two copies of Boon Satyr and a Johnny, Caller of Pride, and a Soldier of the Pantheon.
And I have to assume that Ed can't really fight the fight over the Planeswalker this game. He's got to contain Scott's board, so I would assume that one of the Boon Satyrs is going to hit the graveyard, though perhaps not if Ed has Bile Blight in hand.
There goes the Ajani. This is another Thoughtseize. So Metcalf will put the hand back down right away again, so there goes Boon Satyr. But Ed had to take quite a bit of damage to it, and he's about to take a whole bunch more.
It's one of those times where Thoughtseize, not the most effective card. Scott's hand very redundant.
Attack for 6, and Metcalf down, excuse me, 7. Put Metcalf down to, put Mecabe down to 4. And now there's Soldier Pantheon, so Metcalf is all in.
Yep.
And Ed's going to pick up his 2 lands and concede the game. The beatdowns. Oh, the beatdowns.
Just cast stuff against Black Devotion. Just cast things. Does not even matter. They can have text boxes. They can not have text boxes. It's all the same because it's just a mana efficiency battle.
Scott Metcalf does win game number 1 over Ed Mecabe. Reno Aggro does win game number 1 over Mono Black Devotion. Now we take a look at the sideboards. What's Mono Black got?
2 copies of Rootborn Defenses, 2 Setessan Tactics, a Banishing Light, 3 copies of Unflinching Courage, 2 copies of Drastani, 4 copies of Skylasher, and a Reclamation Sage. I think that my first instinct would just be to present the same 60. He already has 3 Banishing Lights in the main. You can only have so much removal in your beatdown to get a deck against Mono Black because you need to weather the storm of all their removal. It wouldn't surprise me if he consider bringing in the Skylashers in place of some of his more reactive cards just to have more stuff to put into play. But I think that Scott's going to do very little sideboarding, and you can see he's already shuffling and getting ready to present for game 2. I think that it's reasonable for him to just present the same 60 he had in game 1.
Looks pretty happy with his configuration here. On McCabe's side, we have 3 Duress, 2 Doomblade, 2 Freakus Cure, and Underworld Connections, a Hero's Downfall, 2 copies of Lifebane Zombie to go along with the 2 in the main deck, 2 Driving Sorrow, and then 2 copies of Erebos, God of the Dead. I expect to see the additional Lifebane Zombies come in here. The additional Hero's Downfall is just more removal, and those 2 Doomblades.
It's interesting because there's the first tier of quality removal, the Lifebane Zombies, the Doomblade, the Hero's Downfall. We know those are coming in, those just work. A little bit further down the list, what do you do with Freakus Cure and Drown in Sorrow? There are targets in the green-white deck, but there's also Fleece Main Lions and Loxodon Smiters and so forth. So it works against a percentage of the deck, but not against others. So whether or not those cards come in is going to be predicated on how many cards in Ed's deck he thinks are bad and he wants to take out. I think that the Duress is not great in this matchup. I don't know how many copies of Underworld Connections he wants. I don't know how many copies of Nightveil Spectre he wants. So I think that's going to determine a lot of if you see sort of the second tier of quality sideboard cards coming in the matchup.
I feel that a card that is very underappreciated in this matchup from the Mono Black Devotion side is Duress. You have a lot of targets against green-white. They have quite a few creatures in, actual 20 creature cards, but they have a lot of spells too. 4 Advent of the Worm, 3 Ajani's, 4 Celestial Charm, 3 Call of the Conclave, and 3 copies of Banishing Light.
The fact that he has called the Conclave tips it over in my mind. I don't know if Ed necessarily is armed with this information, but Scott with a much more populate-centric build of the deck, mostly contained in the sideboard, the root-born defenses and the Tristanis, but I believe that you're right that against Scott's particular build of green and white, that duress would be a very powerful card.
Ed'll be on the play. He's happy enough with what he has, just a swamp, pass the turn back, so don't discard spell again. Metcalf, just a Temple Guard. So Mecabe will draw. Put you to the test. Put you to the test. It's a pack rat.
And with no play on turn 1, if Ed has another land here, I think Scott's going to be in a world of trouble.
Warburg was the draw. Mecabe already had a land. He's going to deploy a swamp. And it's that pack rat game plan now. Johnny was the draw. Well, the race is on now. We'll start by attacking. Looks like with the Voice Resurgence. Ed says, absolutely, I will take 2. Down to 18. Scott for his turn. We'll play a Forest now, and there's Call the Conclave. So Centaur token is incoming. That's probably going to be it for him.
And plays like this are not going to get it done for Scott in this game. The Ajani in his hand does give him some sort of shot. If he's able to get in a couple shots here or there, then the flying double strike option does give him a way to win this game, but it's going to be tough.
It gives him the chance to steal it. There's your rat token. Mecabe will draw a card. So there's a Mutavault. See the hand there, Hero's Downfall. Devour Flesh as well. But for Mecabe, it's pretty simple. It's a pack rat kind of game.
What's interesting to me is if Ed is going to respect the ability of the green-white aggro deck to effectively burn him out of the game. A lot of times you're playing against green-white and you're just saying, all right, well, I can afford to go to 1, but 1's not 0. It's different than playing against something like mono-red aggro. It's not really the case with the green-white because of Advent of the Worm, Ajani, Boon Satyr, there is range in this deck. So is Ed going to try to make some effort to preserve his life total as this game progresses?
Scott deep in the tank on this turn. Trying to figure out the best line to take. He's going to start by playing a Plains as his 4th land. And here come the idiots. Voice of Resurgence and a Centaur token. Celestia Charm at the ready. Doing its best to mask it. We'll discard a swamp to make a rat. And it looks like it may be time to do some blocking. Activate the old Mutavault, make these 3 rats into 4/4s. There's a block there. See if there'll be a block anywhere else, though.
I think Scott's saying, you want to trade your voice plus a Celestia Charm for one of my rats, that's fine. But I'm not going to risk putting a block in front of the Centaur.
Also gets an elemental token, too. Voice of Resurgence showing just how powerful it can be. So there's the elemental. Now the follow appears the Fleecebane line, so he's building a pretty nice board here. The problem is that pack rat in combination with Mutavault is just able to keep up or outpace it very quickly. The draw for the turn for Ed was a Thoughtseize. Curious to see if he will fire that off here.
Fleecebane Lion plus Ajani is another sort of backdoor way to get in some damage here.
There's our board. Hero's Downfall will take care of the Fleecebane Lion. So Mecabe switching plants here. That's a little dangerous.
This is a pretty valuable reprieve here for Scott. Ed's still at 15, but the Centaur at least gets to make an attack next turn.
It'll be Devour Flesh now. So Metcalf will gain 2. Risky to switch gears in this spot. There's an attack for 4.
All right, well, this is Scott's big chance here. If he rips a Boon Satyr here, for example, he could attack bestow the Boon Satyr, untap, Ajani flying in double strike, and that could be game. And that's what I mean about respecting the green-white aggro deck's range. It has more reach than you typically associate with decks like this.
And Johnny can kill you out of nowhere. That's part of the reason Scott's not going to deploy that card right now. He does not want to open that up to being killed by Hero's Downfall or just a simple attack.
Yeah, I think he's saving that as his... That's the spell he wants to play when either the board is stable or it is going to cost him to win the game.
Banish Line will take care of the rat token, and Ed will untap with just one pack rat. Doomblade the draw for the turn. Time to discard this Thoughtseize to pack rat. So now the rats are 2/2s. There's an attack for 2 with Doomblade at the ready. Metcalf will draw. It's a Plains, and now he's flooding pretty badly. Johnny just the only spell left.
He still has potentially a chance here with one of his high impact draws, especially Avenue of the Worm, but the window is closing here pretty quickly. And it's one of those spots, you know, Scott can go ahead, he can play Ajani, he can put a counter on his Centaur, and that's a clean attack, but the Ajani just dies on the way back. He can give his Centaur flying in double strike, but it's effectively the same result. And I think Scott's just trying to determine here, does he need to try to get in this 6 points of damage right now? Because imagine that Ed's hand is nothing here. You could give the Centaur flying in double strike, and if you happen to draw a Ajani next turn, then you have a kill.
Yeah, that's the W. Unfortunately, this Doomblade kind of mucks all that up.
That's the problem here, is Ed drew Doomblade last turn, and I think that's going to be too much to overcome.
And here's the attack, and that's the Doomblade. It's a good attempt from Scott, of course, playing to win the best he can, but Ed was able to draw the answers.
It's the only thing to be done there. He made the play that he could make.
And discard this swamp to make a pack rat, probably fire up the old Mutavault too. Coast is relatively clear here. 2 cards in grip. Celestia Charm isn't something he really needs to be concerned about right now. So we'll see if Mecabe does fire up Mutavault and get into the red zone and make these rats that much bigger.
I think the question is, does Ed even care about Ajani, or does he want to send everything at Scott?
I think in this situation, of course, I'm working with perfect information. You can just ignore the Planeswalker. Get this game over with. Mutavault does go active. Now it's just time to decide where to attack. You know, Mutavault can't pick up the Ajani. The pack rats will come across towards Metcalf for 8 points of damage. Still a 2-turn clock.
He probably has lethal either way.
Now, of course, one of these rats can't attack. So we will slow one of those down. Yep. And our spotter is right on that, of course. Now, the Mutavault can attack. You know, Ed does not attack there with that. Looks like maybe he wants to. A little unsure of himself in this situation.
Well, I think he just doesn't want to trade the Mutavault with a theoretical Celestia Charm.
Well, fair enough. Voice of Resurgence to draw here for Scott. And Johnny will tick up, put a counter on that, kick the turn back. Will Metcalf still holding those 2 cards tightly. Mecabe will draw. Hero's Downfall will be discarded to make a rat. Fire up the Mutavault. And it's Rat City. Now that rat, of course, can't attack, but it does not matter, as Ed Mecabe will win game number 2 over Scott Metcalf. And they are headed to a 3rd and final one.
Even though Scott did flood out pretty badly at the end of the game, that's an easy thing to identify. For me, it's just didn't do anything on the first turn of the game.
I really think it's crazy to say it's that simple, but I do think it's that simple.
You're not going to be able to outpace, and if it wasn't Pack Rat, you know, Ed clearly won that game just straight away with Pack Rat. If it wasn't Pack Rat, it could have just been a variety of removal spells into some other threat. That could have been good enough to get that game too.
And that's part of the reason people move towards Sunblade Elf in this deck, to make it so they could have 10 1-drops to consistently be able to go 1-drop, 2-drop.
It's important. You know, the trick to beating Mono Black Devotion is all about what are you doing on turn 1 and 2? Because the deck is not really that efficient out of the gates. It has a Thoughtseize or a Duress on turn 1. That's not impacting the board. And then it has a Pack Rat, which on turn 2 doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't really mean anything until turn 4. Or it plays 1 removal spell. So if you go creature, that could be enough for you to be able to leverage that advantage to a win. When you don't do that, you give Mono Black all the time to deploy its more powerful, more efficient cards to break up your synergies with removal and discard, and it's hard to win no matter what kind of cards you're drawing at that point.
Game 3, going to begin here shortly again. Scott not even going to the deck box. Happy with this config. Nothing to change. Easy breezy, beautiful.
Does it have it doesn't cost 1 or 2 mana and have at least 1 point of power? If so, it's probably a respectable card against Mono Black Devotion.
Yeah, run it out there.
Yeah, just
get something on the table, put the pressure on them to have removal right away to kill all of your threats. That's the way you go about trying to beat this deck. That's why you see decks like Rabble Red be so good against this deck. However, for green-white aggro, their threats are more robust than Rabble Red. So cards like Drown in Sorrow and Freakish Cure not very good against this deck.
no. But Doom, the problem is the cost you really pick up is Lifebane Zombie.
Absolutely. It's almost like this black deck is really good or something.
Yeah. It's hard to completely squeeze it because there's enough versatility in the removal that it's hard for it to be completely caught with its pants down against a particular threat. But you can capitalize on its relative inefficiencies early on in the game.
Scott giving a long look, waiting for the green light, see if he's going to keep her mulligan. I do see a Soldier of the Pantheon there. The question, of course, is does he have the right mana? That's the big trick with the deck. You know, do you have the Temple Garden or the Manic Influence to make your mana work?
It does look like he has a Temple Garden in hand. I think his hand might be a little too land heavy is the issue.
Does have to take a mulligan. Not happy with what he sees. Looks like Ed's going to take a mulligan as well.
Scott's build of the deck a little bit different. 3 copies of Temple of Plenty. We've seen a lot of players, Craig Wesco most notably, go to 0 temples in his build. I know Brian Kibler's an advocate for 1. The reason being that this deck is an aggro deck and needs to play its spells on time, play its lands untapped, but Scott, with a more old school approach, has 3 Temple of Plenties alongside 4 copies of Mana Confluence and 4 copies of Temple Garden.
Just too important to curve out.
Yeah.
Just that simple. Can't afford to take a turn off. It's like playing that last game. No 1-drop. Imagine if his first land was a Temple and he had a 1-drop in his hand. Bit of a disaster.
Though Scott's deck is a little bit, I wouldn't say slower, but it's happier to play a slightly longer game. 4 copies of Boon Satyr in the main and a Tristani package in the sideboard. So this is a deck that's happier to sort of futz around a little earlier in the game because it has a more powerful late game than a lot of the other popular builds of green-white.
Looks a little bit like what we saw Daniel Snow top 8 with last weekend in DC. See if Scott can find a 6 that he likes. Same thing can be said for Ed, of course. That doesn't look thrilled.
Well, Ed does not look thrilled at any point in this match, so.
You know, you are right about that.
I wouldn't read too much into that.
Stoicism. Both players will keep. No turn 1 play there from Mecabe yet again. There's a Plains Voice of Resurgence. That's how Metcalf will get things started. Swamp drawn there for Mecabe, and now there's the Mighty Pack Rat. Metcalf will draw. There's a land. Does he have a card like Banish Land to get the Pack Rat off the table? That's the question.
It doesn't appear so, but his hand looks like it has a ton of power in it. Ajani this turn, a 4th land, and 2 copies of Advent of the Worm are the leftovers.
Now the race is on. Johnny going to take up. Voice of Resurgence will become a 3/3, and in for 3 will come Metcalf. Mecabe goes down to 17. Swamp the draw, and that will be deployed. And this is a Pack Rat right away. This, of course, will allow Mecabe to attack Ajani down to 3. Got to try to keep that Planeswalker in check.
But so far, so good for Scott here. And it's
I absolutely agree.
It's going to be really hard for Ed to play this game in such a fashion where Advent isn't a really tough card for him to play against.
I think if you're Scott, you don't even slow down. Make that voice a little bit bigger. You keep coming on in.
Well, he may be thinking about if he wants to play Advent now and put the counter on that.
Make it a 6-6.
I think I'd rather have 2 large creatures than 1 large and 1 small against Black Devotion. Also, plussing onto the voice gets at a Bile-Blight range, which could be a concern.
Well, I think if you're Scott, you can pick up a little bit of information. Ed, on his last turn, he drew his card, he activated Pack Rat, and then he attacked. If he does that again, your worm gets to eat something. He didn't go attack and then, before damage, no blocks or anything like that. He was just draw, activate, go.
He has been doing that a lot. I don't know. That's just because Scott hasn't had the mana up to do anything. But if he does that again here,
it's a small
Scott can
thing.
completely turn this game around. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, if this comes up again, and Ed just main phase makes a Pack Rat and attacks, that could be the end of the game.
You get to eat a rat. You get to keep your Johnny. And you have a 5/5 with trample on the table.
Ed's whole turn gone.
Yep. There's a land.
And I think that operation might have been happening just because in the earlier games and the previous turn, Scott didn't have mana up, so there, he was just kind of shortcutting a little bit. But
all right, here's the attack. I still think he cast this thing. Yeah. Make him have it.
If you're not casting it now, you're casting it at the end of the turn.
Yep.
And whatever Doomblade effect you're playing around still works. So
There is a 5/5 worm. Make him have the answer. Down at 2.
And
Desecration Demon. That big jerk shows up to the table. 6/6 flyer in the house. I think.
Is this just lethal?
Yeah. Well, no, because he can't give flying and double strike with a Johnny.
Oh,
Minus
Johnny's
3
down at 2,
yep.
right?
I was thinking the same thing. He's not there just yet.
But Ed is certainly on the ropes.
Yes. Question now is how do you make your, how do you work with your Johnny? Maybe you make a 5/5 voice, potentially. Maybe your plan here is to say, sacrifice my voice, attack you for 5, make the token from Voice Resurgence, give that +1/+1, and then have another worm. I think you just want to have as many big creatures as possible.
Yeah, the thing is, I think that this is the attack that Scott has to make, but it's tough because the Desecration Demon feels like it's almost too bad to trade any of your cards with because you have so many tools to tap it and then attack for lethal the following turn. But I don't know what Scott's plan really is otherwise. So even though this attack is not great, allowing Ed to either trade with the worm or eat the voice, I don't think Scott has an alternative line, so he kind of has to make his deal with the devil here, so to speak, and allow Ed to have a pretty good block. I don't think he can say go, and I also don't think that he can, play the Advent token, the Advent in his hand, tap the demon, and attack with his 2 creatures. I don't think any of those lines are acceptable, so it just has to be something like this.
6 damage comes through. Voice Resurgence will die. Of course, the trigger will net Metcalf. An elemental token, which will be a 2/2 for right now. Can become a 3/3 later. There's a Plains, and pass the turn back over to Mecabe. Pack Rat and Desecration Demon out there. The draw was a copy, I believe, of Bile-Blight. That one's not all that great on this board. There's a Swamp.
Bile-Blight's not that shabby because Scott will commit most likely a second Advent token to the board, and then it at least dulls a lot of the damage that he can do in combat, but it's not a long-term solution to the stuff that's going on right now.
See if Scott wants to sacrifice anything to this Desecration Demon. And does Ed even want to attack with this thing?
Well, the Ajani is dangerous because he can give flying and double strike and also tap the demon down.
Tough decision for both players, honestly.
Ed just needs to move into combat for starters and see if Scott
Well,
makes
he's already
a move.
put the trigger on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're already past that point. Oh, that's going to bite the dust. See what Cave wants to do this turn. He's already played his land. That was land number 5. He has the ability to make a pack rat and leave Bioblight up, or just deploy a 6/6 flyer and Desecration Demon. Seems really tough to pass up on the Demon this turn.
Yeah, a lot of this depends on, do you believe Scott has nothing or another Advent token? Because now Ed just dies.
Yep.
But I believe this play is better if you think that Scott has just flooded out, and it can only really be one of the two things.
Selesnya Charm was the draw 2 this turn. That makes it even easier.
Well,
don't have to play around any 1-mana threat really from the Mono Black Devotion deck. So Metcalf can, of course, just cast this, exile that, and send everybody into the red zone. And his worms, his elemental tokens, and he are going to march to the top 8. Scott Metcalf with green-white aggro defeats Ed Mecabe 2-1 and his Mono Black Devotion deck. And for Scott, real chance at him to be the #1 overall seed now.
Showed a lot of discipline with the opening hand that he mulliganed there game 3.
Yep.